this module to Drupal 8 on the Google Summer Code program. And the topics are overview of the plugin system. Then we'll continue with why do we need plugins and what are the benefits of plugins. Then I will show an example of writing a plugin, but before that we need to understand some foundational concepts, and in the end we'll create a new plugin type. Okay, so the basic idea of plugins is to allow a particular module or subsystem of Drupal to provide functionality in an extensible and object-oriented way. We could do that in Drupal 7 also, but now with plugins we can do that in an object-oriented way. We can look at the plugin system as some sort of replacement for the hook system. Okay, these two are some definitions of plugins. First one, from a functional perspective, plugins are small pieces of functionality that are solvable. What is important to be mentioned here is that a plugin must do one thing and do it well. It has only one responsibility, okay? From the code perspective, I like these definitions of Eclipse GC, which says that a plugin is a discoverable class that implements a particular interface which adds or extends the functionality to a pluggable system. So, a plugin is nothing more than a simple class which implements certain interface and it has a certain annotation. We'll see that later. Okay, I said it before, we had in Drupal 7 this pattern, hook, whatever info, plus other associated hooks. We can see plugins as a replacement for this kind of hooks. As an example, here we have hook block info, view, configure, save, and so on. All that has been replaced with the block plugin type. So this is an example of plugins. Every block from there is a plugin implementation. Field types are now also plugins. Every item in that list is a plugin. Field widgets are plugins now. Field formatters are plugins. Image effects, CK editor buttons. Every button from there is a plugin. Text filters. Okay, there are more, but those were representative. So now we pass to the benefits of plugins. The first benefit is that definition and implementation are co-located. If you remember, in Drupal 7 we have this pattern, we have a hook info in which we define something, and then we have other hooks, in this case hook view, in which we actually say that what is the content of the block we define in the hook info. So in Drupal 8, all that is in one single file, and we'll see a bit later what this file should contain. But you can see it's pretty simple, and the benefits of having all this in a single file is that the code is cleaner and also reusable. If in Drupal 7 we were to reuse a certain block, we'd have to look in all the hooks and go through switches and based on that key copy everything. In this case, we just have to copy this single file and we have the block. Okay, so plugins are object-oriented, and this has advantages. Okay, in Drupal 7, remember this list of hooks. This is quite hard to document, and it's hard to get an overview of a whole system. In Drupal 8, every hook from there has been moved into an interface. In this case, you can see block plugin interface, in which we have clearly all the methods a block should implement, and well documented. Advantages that come with object-oriented code are also that a plugin can inherit from a base class. If you see here, we have again that interface, but if we extend the block base, we don't have to implement every method. We just have to implement the build method, and we have the block. And of course, we can inherit from another plugin. If you want to modify something to a plugin, extend, override the method you want, and that's it. Okay, plugins are lazy loaded by default. This means that they will not occupy the memory if they are not used. They will only be loaded when they are needed, which is much better than this, because this code lies in the global namespace and is loaded in the PHP memory on every single page load. And of course, plugins are a common pattern. You can see this is a list that PHP generated for me with all the plugins from Drupal 8. If you count them, there are more than 40 plugins. And this is it for this topic. Okay. So now we try to write the plugin, but before some foundational concepts. Autoloading PSR4. What autoloading means? Basically, we don't have to write require once or module include in order to be able to use a class. We are able to just use the class and certain system handle the loading of that class for us. PSR4 standards basically maps namespaces to file system paths. Every module has a namespace, and we can see, in this case, the diff module, that namespace is mapped directly to the source folder of that module. And everything that's after the sum namespace maps directly to the folder structure. Okay, and the benefit of PSR4 is that, again, lazy loading. Okay, dependency injection. There are a lot of talks on this. This is a simple example of that. Benefits are that the code is reusable because we can pass new parameters to the constructor of that class instead of having them hard-coded there. Code is also more testable because of that, and readable. And also because of that, we are somehow enforced to follow the single responsibility principle, because class is not responsible for instantiating objects. It just has to have the business logic. Okay, service containers. I think before that I should explain what are services. Services are global objects that perform some kind of global task. They are stateless, and service containers handle the instantiating of the services. Basically, a service container is an object which can return services. Okay. For example, if we ask for that service, Drupal diff builder manager, which is basically a class registered as a service, you will see Drupal 8 uses this pattern a lot in core. Every manager is registered as a service. The service containers knows to instantiate that object and goes down in the hierarchy and basically builds an object. We don't have to handle the instantiating of services. The service container does this for us. And annotations. Basically, annotations are data in comments, in block comments, and is the primary method that Drupal 8 is using to discover plugins. We see that an annotation can contain key value pairs, and what is important to be mentioned is that annotations are not code, they are actually data. It's just like you store that data in XML file or JSON or whatever. Okay, so now we pass to the code. In this example, I will show how to write a plugin. I don't know if you have used the diff module, but what it does, it compares fields. And let's say we want to change the behavior of the diff module and not compare the text of the field, but compare the length, number of characters in that field. Okay? So this is the main interface for the diff module. By default, text with summary field plugin is selected, and that plugin does this. Okay. Now we write our plugin. We can see a simple class located in a certain namespace, annotated with some keys. If you wonder where those keys come from, they are documented in a certain class. And we implement that interface that is required, and basically all that function does is it returns a string, in this case a number. Okay, we go back in our admin interface. We replace, in fact, first of all, we have to clear the caches because plugins are discovered only when the caches are cleared for performance reasons. Okay, we clear the caches, we go back, select our plugin, and we see that the behavior of the diff module changed totally. Okay, that was it. But the last point, it's mostly focused towards contributor developers, which want to provide a pluggable system. In order to provide a new plugin type, you have to define a plugin manager, a manager that manages plugins of that type. Okay? And that manager is registered as a service, and that service is used for finding and instantiating plugins of that type. Yeah, plugin managers should always implement the interface, plugin manager interface, but I think there are a few places in core where that happens because all plugins manager are extending the default plugin manager, which in turn implements the plugin manager interface. And this is a plugin manager. Basically, this is it, all of it. With this, we just created a new plugin type. We can see we just call the parent constructor, in which we pass the directory structure, in that case plugin/div. That is the folder in which the plugin discovery should look for our plugins of this type. We pass the namespace and module handler which are injected into the constructor, and then we pass the interface which our plugin should implement, and we pass the annotation class which defines what key value pairs are allowed and actually makes sense in the annotation. Aside from that, setcache backend takes care of caching plugins, as I said, to not look for them on every single request. And alter info, we'll see for two steps for what it does. And I will explain a little bit plugin interface. This should contain all the declarations of all the methods the plugin should implement. It has documentation purposes also. By looking at it, developers should understand how to implement the plugin. So it should be very well documented. Annotation class, in this class we define what are the key value pairs allowed in the annotation. In our case, an ID, a label, and the field types, which is an array. Okay, and the last step is to register this class, which is the plugin manager, as a service, and that's how we do it. By the way, this is done in name of the module.services.camp file. And this step is optional, but it's good to have this step done, because most of the time when somebody implements a plugin, she doesn't want to implement every single method from there, especially if we have a lot of boilerplate code, and we should create a base plugin, basically making the job easier for the developers. Yeah, and plugin owner should extend the plugin base. Okay, this is it. These are resources. They are in fact presentations from Drupalcamp. Very good presentations. I recommend you check them out. If you ever have to deal with plugins, but considering the number of plugins in Drupal 8, you sure will. Okay, questions? Okay, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, so that was all for today. Thank you for all for being here. And don't forget that we have a party from 9 a.m. You can find the location if you scan the QR code from at the entrance, or you can also find a link with the Google map already tweeted. Okay, thank you all.